Ever felt the panic of needing a stellar resume right away? Whether you've stumbled upon your dream job listing, faced unexpected layoffs, or simply want to level up, staring at an outdated resume is the worst. This is going to change today, because this is the way to 10x your odds of landing your dream job. Our guest today has over 25 years of resume writing experience. Robynn Storey is a CEO and founder of Storyline Resumes, a trailblazing resume firm dedicated to propelling clients' career to new heights. Robynn and her team have helped over 300,000 clients write storytelling-based executive resumes, cover letters, and LinkedIn profiles, helping them land better and high-paying roles. Welcome, Robynn.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is pretty incredible. I mean, just that number 300,000 itself is incredible. So can you share a bit about the journey of how this got all started and started Story for your firm?
Yeah, absolutely. I've told this story on LinkedIn. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll probably know it. I was working for Pepsi-Cola. At the time, I was working in their marketing division, and they recently had hired a female CEO, so they wanted to bring lots of females into the organization, which I did. And I ended up with this really great job, and I loved it. I had a very long commute. I had one child at home, and one day I woke up and said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And while Pepsi was so good to me and I loved my job, I just was away from home so much and so much traveling. So I had said to my husband, I'm going to quit my job. And good thing, I have a really great husband, and he and I both grew up very poor. So we were used to being poor, even though, I was making great money. And he said to me, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. If you can find something to make enough money to pay for groceries, I can float us for a while until you figure out what you want to do. So I quit a 6-figure job at Pepsi and I became a waitress. And that's how Storyline Resumes was born. So I was home with my daughter during the day and worked with, clients and did a little marketing consulting, did a little HR consulting, and then I would go wait tables at night. And that lasted for a couple of years until I got it off the ground. And so that was 20 some years ago. And here we are all these years later. Now we have a staff of 70. And now, of course, I buy all the groceries, but it was really just taking a chance. I always say I'm accidentally successful. I knew what I wanted for my life. And then I just needed to find a career or a situation or a business that made sense to it. And so that's how we got here today.
That's amazing. You went in reverse. Most people don't go from their, big corporate job to being a waitress. So that's pretty incredible. But
yeah, I mean, even though I'm certainly not an egotistical person, I mean, it was a little bit of a ding to the ego.
Yeah.
You go from sort of being in charge to, would you like fries with that? Kind of thing. But it was so fun. It was such a great learning experience. The restaurant that I worked at was a family-owned restaurant. And to this day, I still use the recipes for like salad dressing and cake icing. And so, everywhere you go, I think if you have the attitude, no matter what your situation, whatever job you're in, even though it might not feel appropriate for you at the time, there's always a takeaway. There's always something to be learned. And for me, that was certainly true. But it's been a really fun journey. I feel very honored that people have let us tell their stories all of these years. They've shared their successes and failures, and we've been a partner to helping people kind of regain their confidence and their, zest for life after what has been a pretty brutal job market over the past few years.
So did you find yourself then you just had some individuals that you started helping in this space and it just started growing? Like,
yeah, I mean, it was a friend of ours who was an engineer and he was having trouble landing interviews, and he was a smart guy. Engineers don't tend to be very effusive about their experience or their successes, right? And I needed to get him thinking a different way in how it was we were going to tell his stories. Engineers think like, mathematicians, they think in terms of engineering, building things, they're not maybe great advocates for themselves. And I said, I'm going to write you a really great resume. When I was hiring, this is what I would want to see. I want to see a story. And so he, sent it off, and he ended up with a great job, and then started sending me some friends. And then after a few months of sort of doing resumes, I was doing it all for free. Again, my husband said to me, my husband's a CPA. I should probably tell you that. He's a corporate controller, and he said, "You really need to charge something for your time." And I said, "You know what, I am. I'm going to charge." So I charged $50 for my first resume, and then it sort of took off from there. And then it was a few years later. I was still pretty small time. It was just me, and I had one other writer and someone to do like part-time admin work. And it was back in 2008 when the housing market crashed. I ended up getting a phone call from a key executive at a big lender. They were exiting the U.S. market, and they were purchasing resume services for 89 of their key executives. And keep in mind, it was me, one writer, and one part-time admin. And when they said, "Can you put together 89 resume packages? We're going to pay you, a lump," and I said yes. And I knew as soon as the word came out of my mouth that I was not nearly equipped to create 89 resume packages. But you know what? I did it. I worked around the clock. I worked weekends. A lot of them were on the West Coast. I would put my kids to bed at night. I'd be interviewing people at midnight. I'd sleep for a couple hours. I'd get out and I'd get up and write resumes. And within, a month, everybody was done. And that's kind of really when Storyline took off. And I thought, we can do this, and started bringing on more people and then figuring out who we are, what's our philosophy, what makes us different. And so it was a lot of fun to build.
That's amazing. And how big is the team now?
70.
Okay, gotcha. Impressive. And when you were jumping into, that specific, project and the sides of that, I'm curious, why does a company come to you and ask for that many resumes for existing executives? Usually people think about needing resumes in terms of them trying to find a job, but this sounds like the company asking for their existing resumes.
Yeah, the company was wanting to support these 89 executives that were going to be losing their job because the company had made the decision to exit the U.S. market. They closed 600 branches in the U.S., and these folks had been key to their growth. And as a sign of a good gesture, good faith, they wanted to purchase resume packages so that these folks that they were going to be laying off, and they knew that they were getting laid off, that they had some tools to kind of help them in their job search. And through the years, every single one of those 89 people have come back to us for updates. We've done resumes for, the friends and family. Some of them live in different countries. Some of them stayed with the company and moved to Europe, where they still had a presence, and, other people moved on. But it was a crash course in banking and lending. And that's another thing, when you're in this kind of business and you're dealing with different, very, very diverse groups of people. We've done resumes for, I remember one time doing a resume for someone who with a PhD in philosophy that was running a government think tank. I mean, what the hell do I know about government think tanks, right? But I learned, you do the research, you figure it out. And it's been such an incredible exercise and experience to get to kind of talk to the people. Back in the day, I used to do a lot of the interviewing myself, and, a lot of the terminology maybe I didn't understand. But you learn it, you absorb it, and now I can speak almost any kind of vernacular for any organization and any function. And, and that really becomes pretty valuable stuff. And then, of course, which I've then shared with my team. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Michael and I have film school backgrounds, and then we were at Disney, and Michael at Disney and Netflix. So long entertainment, couple of decades. So storytelling is kind of in our DNA. Just curious, what led you to lean into story as kind of the cornerstone of how you tell?
Well, Story is my married name, so that seems like apropos, right?
Built for you, yeah.
And then when people would send me their resumes, I was like, snooze, this is so boring. I mean, it just doesn't really tell me anything about you. It's very descriptive of the job. If you're an accountant, I already know you balance the general ledger and you pay the bills. If you're in sales, I know you set appointments and call on customers. Nobody gives a shit, right? I want to say something meaningful. I want this to be fun. I want this to feel like a celebration of accomplishment. And it's that kind of attitude and exuberance and excitement for people's stories that kind of led to the philosophy that has been the core of how Storyline writes resumes. I want to tell something that means something to me. So, I just was talking with a group, and they had asked me, if a young person, for instance, is writing a resume, what should they say? And even though we don't work with like recent grads, right? I always give this advice, and this sort of goes up the food chain. If you were a lifeguard when you were in college and you put on your resume that you were a lifeguard, okay, great, you were a lifeguard, and then you describe being a lifeguard, whatever. Okay, that's one thing. But if you were a lifeguard and you saved 7 kids from drowning that summer, or, you rescued someone from a shark attack, or you created a program to teach toddlers how to be safe in the ocean. That to me, that tells me something about you. So our philosophy here is, 99% of what's on that resume better be telling me something about you and not about the function of your job. If I have all kinds of terminology for people's careers and their attributes. I call it the shit show, the turnaround expert, the person that walks into a mess and, makes it great. The person who takes a team that the culture is so bad and they create these exercises and these really fun programs and they get people engaged and, they become like the boss of the year. Those are the things that mean something to me. If you go into an organization and you say, hey, we're spending way too much money on this, I think we can do it this way, and you save $2 million, that tells me something about you. Not only does it tell me something about you, but it tells me something that I maybe want you to do for me. And those are the kinds of resumes that relate and they resonate with people. So if I'm reading your resume and I can't get a genuine feel for who you are, your attitude, your passion, I'm probably just moving on to the next person, because we all know right now there's plenty of candidates out there.
Wow. That is actually great. Just a few of the stories that you shared, definitely already stick. I'm like, I feel like I know these people. I want to meet these people. I want to ask them questions. And I think that's the power of what you're saying. You said not new grads. Is that because there's not enough there for you to work with? Is it because they just typically aren't looking to invest the money in something like this? What makes you not there?
We used to kind of do resumes for everyone. We were sort of a resume for everyone kind of service. And then through the years, we found that the majority of our business was really coming from more mid to senior level candidates, as well as the executive and the C-suite. And then, once your business sort of begins to grow and you evolve, then you sort of build teams that are going to help you continue to pursue that. So, a lot of resume companies have a really, big mix of people on their team. We're all USA based, which is important to me because we're working primarily within the North American market. We do have clients globally, but mostly at the executive space. And then I found that we just kind of got away from the new grad sort of thing. Now, we'll still write resumes for new grads if, we worked with your mom or dad and they want to purchase a package for you and they still get the same white glove treatment. But I found that since we were recruiting, former business executives, I have lots of lawyers on staff. I have lots of college professors on staff, MBAs on staff. They tend to be more equipped to tell a story around what is now considered our target audience. So we kind of cut out our niche. We stay in our wheelhouse and, but we write resumes for every function across every industry. So that's just who we've become.
Yeah, well, I think just that tidbit you said there alone, anybody who's, able to take that on and listen to that and realize the story component of it is just so huge. I love it. So you're on LinkedIn, you've got a few followers over there, which let's just say,
followers.
Yeah, when you reach that, million marker on LinkedIn, that's Kardashian level elsewhere, for people who aren't sure. That's huge. So how long have you been on LinkedIn, and how critical is it now for your business?
I think I've been on LinkedIn from like the first or second year that they were around. And I loved it because it was such a great way to kind of get the word out. And then I just started telling customer stories and sort of musings on life. And everything that I say on LinkedIn is really rooted in a couple of things. Respect for one another. The ability to engage. To tell that story, to treat people with kindness and humanity. I mean, I am, pretty vocal about what's happening in the job market. And, I relay stories that our clients, tell us. And I've sort of become, like I said, the repository for every terrible job search story out there. But, LinkedIn's huge. I mean, LinkedIn is huge for job seekers. I'm old enough to remember that, you got a job because your dad had a buddy that knew a guy that knew someone that worked at such and such, and they put in a good word for you, right? There was a lot of that. That was networking back in the olden days, right? LinkedIn is like that, but on steroids and on a global level. We are all connected in some way. And if people take the time to learn what real networking is, they take the time to build their networks, they'll almost never be unemployed.
Great way to put it. Couldn't agree more. Of course, so many people out there, as we all see, end up waiting until the situation that they're in that they have to actually start being like, oh, time to network. Do you have a best practice? Do you think how people who struggle with that should be approaching it so that it becomes a little bit more habitual than
A chore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. First of all, everyone should keep what I call the long resume. This is like the crazy document that a couple of times a year, I don't care if it's 2 pages or 200 pages, but you're making a concerted effort, you're putting it on your calendar, and you're sitting down and you're saying, what did I accomplish these past 6 months? You are denoting any kind of projects that you worked on, any kind of kudos that you received at work, any kind of obstacles that you overcame. If you're in sales, you're writing down your big wins and the amount of money that generated for the company. If you're in operations, you're talking about your retention, things that are reflective of the KPIs that you might be graded on at work, right? And you're just keeping that in a long running form. You're not keeping that at work. You're keeping that at home. You're keeping it on your personal computer. And then when the time comes and you need to have a resume written to conduct a job search, we are not, pulling teeth to kind of get data, get information, get stories. Sorry, let my pup in. To get stories, to get content, to get accomplishments. He's new and he's a baby, and now to get numbers, to get metrics. We're not trying to remember things that happened 17 years ago, right? So you're keeping that long resume. And then most people are not thinking about their resumes, right? They're thinking about their life. You're not really thinking about your resume until you need it. And unfortunately, when you need it, it's like too late, right? There's an urgency. You've been laid off unexpectedly. Someone called you. They have a great opportunity. Hey, send me your resume. We're 2 weeks out, right? So most of executive resume firms that do a good job, will take the time to interview you, go through several drafts. We have our clients send homework, job targets. So we're aligning resumes to certain targets. So, that takes time, right? So we have expedited that we offer, but we're limited on how many resumes we can expedite every week. But I think we can do 20 a week, and every week we do 20 because someone needs it ASAP, right? So, think about your resume, especially right now with what is going on with this economy, what is happening with these mass layoffs. We're finding that top producers are getting laid off with the same zest and fervor as people that have been dialing it in for years. We all know those people, right? People that show up, they do the job, they go home, they don't do anything any more than's expected, which is perfectly fine. And then you've got people that are running the show. They're the innovators. They're the business transformation experts. They're getting laid off too. So have that resume ready. If you haven't updated your resume in 5, 6, 8 years, give us a call.
And what is, when you say having that resume updated, and let's just say strong resume, what does a strong resume look like to you? Is it that story component to it? Is there more to it? Are you like a 2-pager? Like if you had to give some high-level best practices about what a strong resume looks like, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, so we're definitely a 2-pager here because we work with senior and executive folks. They tend to have lengthier careers. We go back 10, 12, 15 years on a resume. Best practices is to speak in the language of the job that you're after. And we do that in a couple of ways. So, if you are, I'm just going to use business development. So if you're a business development pro, say you're a senior level executive in the business development arena, whether it's in tech or healthcare or whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm looking for numbers. I'm looking for growth. I'm looking for impact. So all of the things on your resume should point to those 3 things. If you're managing a team, I want to get a sense of what sort of leader you are. Are you hands-on? Are you hands-off? Are you that team builder? Are you someone who is cheerleading, or are you the guy that's setting the goals and letting your team? It gives me a sense of who you are on your resume. So those are the kinds of questions we would be asking for. If you are a healthcare executive, I want to know all the KPIs. You're graded on things like quality. You're graded on things like patient outcomes. You're graded on things like employee satisfaction, revenue, anything that is reflective of the KPIs that you're graded on at work, I should be seeing on your resume. And then we take it a step further. It's not just saying, hey, I got here and revenue was $1 million and I turned it into $2 million. It's like, here's how I did it. These are some of the innovative and fun and exciting and original things that I did to get us to this level. Again, tells me something about you. That's where the storytelling piece comes in. So that's what we're after. Now, if we're developing a resume for you and you've never kept track of any of that information, It's not a problem. We're going to dig it up. We've been told that our resume interviews feel like proctology exams.
Yeah.
We don't want that answer. We want a better answer. I need you to go back and find this number. I need you to tell me exactly what that deal meant. So sometimes our clients leave us with a little laundry list of things they have to get back to us. But it's all really designed for your benefit to make sure that we're capturing the essence of the professional that you are.
In today's market, where it seems like there's a lot of candidates and the people that are actually reviewing those resumes have a lot more volume to look through, like, what gets them through the door? Like, is there like some kind of a system that they have to play?
Absolutely. So most companies use something called ATS, which is applicant tracking systems. And there's a lot of AI generated keyword requirements the candidates kind of have to go through. So when you're going on a company website and you're uploading your resume, so we make sure that our clients have 3 different versions of the resume. They have the Word file and the PDF, which I call the pretty resume. It's presentation style. It might have some color. It's going to have fun visuals on it because they're engaging, and executives tend to be handing out and emailing resumes more. But you're going to get something called an ATS-friendly resume, which is really just the words on your resume. Your resume then gets parsed by a system. There's lots of different systems out there, and then kind of, grades your viability as a candidate based on those keywords. This is where AI comes in. So at Storyline Resumes, we don't use AI to develop resumes, but we do use AI to identify the most popular keywords. So let's say you're a customer, you come in, we do an intake call, we tell you what package is right for you, we get you signed up for services. You're going to go through an interview with one of our interviewers, pretty in-depth, pretty intense, good stuff. Then we're going to give you some homework. You're going to upload a couple of job targets that you're interested in. And then we're going to take those job targets and we're going to drop it in AI. We're going to command it. We're going to say, tell us the top 20 keywords in these job targets. And we're going to sort of find a universal connection, right? And then as we're developing your resume, we're going to take those 20 important keywords, the things that most people are looking for in a candidate looking for that kind of job, and we're weaving them into your resume in an organic way. That's the key. So it has to be organic, because a lot of companies, even though they're using AI to sort of eliminate jobs, they don't want AI generated resumes. They're kicking them out. They've already learned to identify them. They call them AI detectors. They're booting you from the system because they all say the same thing, right? So we want to make sure that we're playing the game. The keywords are in there, but they're in a way that makes sense.
And is it a specific tool that's used to be able to identify what those best words are?
Yeah, we use Chat GPT here.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah. Interesting. So then your opinion on other AI related, because there's a flood of them on the market now, as far as, like resume writing, cover letter writing, so on and so forth. I could see why, because of the storytelling component to what you had, mentioned there being something that I don't feel like AI is still, you still got to get to the root of it in the human. It's almost like you got to play psychologist to help people probably put out there the things that they struggle with. But is there a place that you see AI having even more of a role outside of the ATS keywords in the future?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily for us because of the clientele that we are working with, and our approach and philosophy to the storytelling piece. I tried to use AI when it first came out. I dropped a whole bunch of information in it and I said, write a resume. And it's really like a resume that was produced like in the 1980s, right? It's very generic, very descriptive of the job itself and not really anything about the person. So that's why companies now are kind of, they're booting these out because they're getting resumes and cover letters that are generated with the exact same content. Again, when you're hiring someone, you're hiring the person, right? You're not hiring the resume, but the resume is a tool that's going to get you in the door. So I need to have a feel for, like, does this person understand my business? Do I feel like they know what they're talking about? Do they have enough related experience for me to give them a phone call and set them up for an interview? These are all things that right now AI is not capable of doing or very successful in doing, because it's pulling data right from everywhere. It's pulling a description, and I'm not necessarily after a description. I'm after what is genuine to you, what makes you special as a human and an employee. That's our approach. So we're finding that now more than ever, it is so important that you're telling a story that helps you stand apart, because the job boards are overrun. Every position that's open, it's getting 300, 400, 600 candidates I mean, people are sending me screenshots, 2,000 applicants for this mid-level position, like bonkers.
Yeah, that is interesting and something I hadn't really thought about too when it comes to AI. AI in some ways makes it so easy for people to do it that there's probably a flood. So it's like, how do you stand out with that? Which is where I think both storytelling and the networking component are pretty critical. What I will say is, a lot of time I do think people aren't very good about actually, it's almost like people don't like to toot their own horn, and a resume, you need to. So if you're not good at really trying to pull out, like, people will put something high level instead of actually being able to articulate that value more. So like I say, I absolutely see how that's so important of what your team would be able to get out of them. I'm curious.
Because that's where our approach really comes in because, my generation, we've all been sort of taught this sense of humility. Don't be bragging about yourself. Our mother told us never to talk about ourselves that way. Now we're doing something like the polar opposite, right? This is the place we want you to brag. We want to see the accomplishments. We want you to be effusive and excited and passionate about the work that you've done and the story that you have to tell. This is where we're sort of dragging it out of people. And it's not necessarily for, indicative to one generation or another. It could be, varied as personalities are concerned. So our job is to get people to the point where they're a little bit beyond their comfort zone as far as, what we're saying on their resume. I used to say, if I send you a resume draft and I haven't made you a tiny bit uncomfortable, I haven't done my job.
I feel like even for me over the years, formatting has been a big debate. Like, some people want to use color, some people just plain. Like, what is the best practice on formatting?
Yeah, I mean, we love a color resume. We love a visually interesting resume because in a sea of black and white resumes, right, we want you to be purple. Not that we use purple on resumes, we don't. But we want you to stand out. And especially because, like, the crowd of folks that we're working with, while they get ATS resumes, these are people that are networking. They're folks that headhunters are reaching out to them. They're going to be emailing a resume. They're going to be sending a PDF. So visually, from a visual perspective, I want it to be interested. I have call out boxes. I'm putting quotes in resumes about feedback that they've received. Again, all very genuine, all designed to set you apart. Now, as far as formatting is concerned, we have a library of formats that we use here. And we make recommendations to our clients. Sometimes we'll say, okay, for your particular industry, we suggest, this sort of look, or pick out whatever you want. I had a client not long ago who was a global executive in the legal space. She was a corporate counsel for a huge organization, and she picked the showiest, the most colorful, and I was like, I didn't see that coming. But she's like, this makes me feel really good about it. What I'm trying to do here. And she had a media response. So, we kind of let folks pick their own personal preference and, how they feel, about what it looks like and, how it presents them. But we've got a million of them. I mean, it's such a fun process to go through. And most people don't really think about, hey, I'm going to write my resume. This is going to be fun. Most people think about, oh my God, I have to write my resume. Somebody stabbed me in the eye, right? And we make it fun. We make it engaging. We're super responsive. We love to tell a story. My interviewers will not let you get away with what I call girl answers. We work with a lot of female executives. We don't let them sort of administrate the language. If you're someone that can't remember, we have you digging for stuff. I mean, we want to make sure that when you leave us, you have the best possible tools.
I think a lot of companies these days, like when you try to apply, you actually have to submit through like a Workday form. And I think the most annoying thing is that everyone's instance is different. So you're duplicating the same information. But how does this come into play where formatting is no longer a thing because it's data into their system?
Formatting is definitely a thing in the ATS. So all of our clients leave with what is called an ATS compatible resume. So it used to be that the ATS systems were fairly universal, right? So there's a particular format that you use with an alignment and, the characters that you can and can't have on that page. And we make it easy for a customer to copy and paste, drop that in a box, or to upload it, and it kind of populates, 100% of what they're looking for. But it's not 100% anymore. A lot of companies are sort of taking the stance where I want to make it harder for you to apply instead of easier for you to apply. So there's definitely still some manual entering that goes on when you go on a different website. So again, ATSs are not universal. We're constantly adapting our ATS forms, with changing times. but none of them are 100%. You're still manipulating, a few boxes here or a few boxes there. I personally think that is designed to make sure it is that you really want to apply for this job. So making it a little bit harder for you. Everything seems to be a little harder instead of a little easier.
I do still wonder why there's not, if you think about, Artin had mentioned just the forms and stuff like that. I still don't know, unless you tell me there is one, why there's not a tool today. Kind of like how people can sign in with their Google Anywhere, you could sign in with Facebook for other places. Why isn't there that one place where you have that has all your information and you don't have to put it in every other place? You just connect the two and they handshake and there you go. It takes everything over.
That would be amazing. I imagine that would be one hell of an undertaking, right?
Right.
To sort of universalize, the application process with your portfolio, with your cover letter, with your, but yeah, I mean, we're seeing more and more. I mean, not only has the application process gotten more difficult and labor intensive, the interview processes are out of control. I mean, I did a post on LinkedIn a couple of months ago where he talked about how back in like 1994, the average number of interviews you went on for a job was, between 1 and 2. 2 was very rare. Most of the time you went on 1. Now in 2024, it's 5. The average job search back then lasted less than a month. Now it lasts 6 months, 8 months. And it was all of these sort of comparisons between, 30 years ago and today, and yet the outcomes are the same. The average tenure in jobs is exactly the same. The things that people say are most important to them, decent salary, good benefits, nice coworkers, nice boss. That's a big one. Most people don't think about that. Good benefits. It's all the same. Everything that people want, that's never changed. But the process of getting a job has changed dramatically.
That's so interesting. I almost wonder, I'm like, okay, does that mean do certain companies, did they get better at finding certain candidates? Are some companies raising this more? Like I know for me, when I interviewed at Netflix, there definitely is a process there where you go through the panels. And I do think I went through about 10 interviews, maybe 11, which is crazy in some ways. But then at the same time, they generally speaking did do a better job, I think, of hiring than what I've seen at some other companies. So sometimes I could see that that's paying off, but it also depends on the role. It's kind of like that whole thing that everybody laughs at now that's become a meme where it's like you need, 10 years of experience, entry-level job, sort of thing where you're like, come on. But I'm curious to, your just thoughts on whether or not you think that, these higher standards have resulted in any changes, because obviously if companies and others are doing it, or is it just a bureaucracy because everybody wants to have a say in somebody's hiring, which I've also seen happen.
I think there's a couple of things, right? I think technology has made hiring harder instead of easier. And I think that, as a society, right, we want to use technology to make our lives easier, not more difficult. So that's the first thing. The second thing is universally across the board, about 40% of people who are hired in the United States of America on any given day are considered to be bad hires. What does that mean? That means that they're not really equipped to do the job. They leave within 6 months or 8 months. They're struggling, they're failing. There's a lot of things that go into that, right? It could be lack of onboard, it could be lack of training, could be lack of decision making, could be a lot of things. So when you think about the hiring practice, whether I interview you one time and make a decision as to whether or not I'm going to hire you for the job, or I interview you 12 times, almost half the time I'm going to be wrong.
Interesting, right?
So it seems like a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of processes, a lot of money, a lot of people going through endlessly long interview processes for about the same outcome. Yes, of course, there are going to be variables, within organizations. Like you said, you feel like Netflix really did a great job of identifying and bringing on people that they felt were going to stay. But, on the flip side of that, Netflix, I see show up in these memes all the time. They have like huge ranges for salaries. Like I see job postings for them that this starts at, you could make $100,000 or $900,000. There's no job in the world where you can make $100,000 or $900,000. Let's see. I mean, so I think it all ends up being a little bit of a wash. I think that human decision making, people who feel empowered to make hiring decisions, are lacking currently. I think we're relying a little too much on technology that doesn't necessarily give us the right answers.
That is very interesting. One of the things Art and I long ago thought about pursuing in some of our different software things, we never pushed it this way, but one thing we did notice while at Disney is a lot of people who are also hiring aren't actually equipped for hiring. Sometimes they've never hired before, and sometimes despite, that being a company that's pretty good at trying to get management, leadership, and other training, it was just not an area that was focused on. And even the whole process, when people did, have maybe somebody be part of a panel, if you want to call it that, they weren't equipped. Like, well, okay, is there a specific thing you're looking for me to, drill into? What things should I understand here? So I do think that there's that interesting thing too, that maybe that's a big piece of it, is nobody's confident today in also how to approach that sort of thing, because a lot of them never, really been trained to. Some of them are moved into management and leadership positions, despite not actually maybe even really wanting to do that, just because that is what it's taken sometimes to climb a ladder in certain places. Anyway, probably that
story. I tell this story in my book, and I tell this story fairly often in my life. When I was a kid growing up in this little teeny town called Crabtree, Pennsylvania, population 400, like 99% of the people I was related to, right? We used to have to travel a fairly long distance, 15 or 20 miles because we were out in the country. So if you wanted to go roller skating, you wanted to go to the movies, you wanted to go to the mall, it was pretty far away. So all the parents used to take turns, with our core group of friends of, dropping off and picking up. So we had this one friend, they were a family that lived down the street from us, and there were 5 kids in the family. 4 of the kids are engineers, and the daughter is a guidance counselor at school. Actually, one of the kids is my sister's husband. They've been married for almost 40 years. Their dad was a laborer for the water company. He was a digger for the water company. And when it was his turn to take us anywhere, when we were driving in the car in the countryside, he would be pointing things out. Oh, in 1978, we brought sewage to this town. In 1982, I remember there was a water main break and it flooded this farm and we had to go rescue the cows with a boat. And, and he would drive, and as he was driving, he would tell these great stories about, he remembered where they brought water, instead of well water, they brought city water to this town or whatever. And through the years, he was so interesting and he was such a great guy and he was so smart. And I remember even thinking to myself as a young person, God, I hope somebody wrote this down someplace.
Right.
Like, I hope that there is, these memories and these stories are like phenomenal. I hope somebody's keeping track, right? That's how I feel about hiring today. I think that when hiring happened, and I'm not somebody that's nostalgic for the old days, but when hiring happened in, previous decades, right? You sat down with a human, you got a sense of whether or not they were bullshitting you, whether or not they really could do the job, how they answered questions, what their personality was like, whatever, right? And now all this phenomenal technology has come in play. And now we have an entire generation of people that are relying on technology instead of human instinct. And I am still a believer that the best hiring happens when it is fueled by your gut instinct. In human resources, we used to call it your internal HR compass. You either had it or you didn't. And I think that we now have an entire generation of people that don't have it because they weren't equipped for it. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody wrote down the story about the drowning cows, right? And now they are relying on some technology that someone created to make a decision about humans, and it's not working out.
That's a great way to look at it. I love that, actually. I think that all sounds very sadly realistic.
Makes me think of telephone numbers. Because in the 90s, I knew a bunch of numbers. These days, I know one because I rely on technology to give me the numbers.
Yeah. I mean, technology has made us smarter than we've ever been, but I think dumber than we think.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, we'll lean into a technology from my next question, which is LinkedIn, though, still, because I think today it does, at least in my opinion, it's always one of those things where I will go and check whether or not, when I get a resume, usually these days people will give you a LinkedIn profile link as well. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on the importance of LinkedIn when it comes to somebody who is applying for a role, even if they just send their resume, for example.
Yeah. So your LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile and your resume should be a little bit different. So your resume is what I call the dirty laundry document, right? This is where you can tell a story that maybe you would not share on a public platform. Maybe you got into a job. Maybe it was a mess. Maybe the previous leadership dropped the ball. Maybe the team's morale was in the toilet. Maybe you were taking on a situation that was, in the red. Maybe they were losing money. These are not things that you would sort of espouse on a public platform. It's not what you would have on LinkedIn, but you can certainly tell that story on your resume because it's going to a smaller audience and a captive audience. So that's what your resume should have. It should have the true story, the genuine story, the impact that you've made, how you turn things around, yada, yada. On LinkedIn, you want to talk in first person. You want to be telling a story about your history, but you want to keep it a little more topical. You can absolutely put some accomplishments in, but even companies, previous employers, they're a little bit funny about you posting, say revenue numbers or, problem children or troubled projects. So you kind of want to walk the fine line for what should be on your resume and what is on LinkedIn, but absolutely they should both work in tandem. The most important thing that I think people forget is this. Not only can people look at your LinkedIn profile, they can look at your LinkedIn activity. So if you're a person that is engaging in, say, inflammatory political posts, if you're someone who is being a jerk versus being someone kind, if you're someone who is, sometimes they get the garbage posts on, the girls with the shirts are hanging down and all the guys are like, you look, I'm like, don't do that. There's a place for that. It's not on LinkedIn. So people can kind of see your activity, and that can tell me a lot about you as well. So unless you would want your grandma to see it, probably don't do it or don't say it. And that's kind of our rule of thumb for LinkedIn.
Got it. It's interesting too. Like what you say is often counterintuitive for folks, as you mentioned, the dirty laundry on the resume, because I think so many people still are trying to put up this persona to this degree. And I think that's probably why you have so many resumes that start looking so similar, because there's no personality to it. Because to play it safe, we, basically cut out anything in there that might sound like it's not safe. The best way I can.
Different or special.
Yeah.
You don't have to be safe on your resume because it's your story. And as long as it's the truth, you don't have to be safe, because those are the things that set you apart. It makes me want to meet you. It makes me want to have a conversation with you.
What would you say is the most important part of your LinkedIn profile when you're kind of in the job hunting process?
So your picture is obviously important. So you want a nice picture. When I say a professional picture, I don't mean professionally done. You could take it with your smartphone. So you want a nice picture. I think your summary is really important. And then your job titles. Make sure your job titles are reflective of, the jobs that you've had, because it's the first thing that people look at. They're looking at the job titles.
What's your opinion on the AI photos that people might put up there where it's still them, but you could tell it's a little, helped?
I'm not a fan.
Yep.
And you can tell it right away.
Yeah, I know exactly.
I'm 55, right? I would love to, laser out my wrinkles. I would love to, whatever. I would love to sort of, edit this or that or any. In women especially, I think we want to edit out all of our imperfections and blah, blah, blah. But, I just plot my picture up there and, warts and all. So I think that it's important that you're genuinely you. I want you to look good. I want you to feel good about how you look. I'm not a big fan of that because, again, I think that makes me almost feel like, or are they trying to present themselves as something that they're not?
Which then could speak to everything else that they present to you, because you want it true. What about the banner?
I love the banner. I think the open to work banner should be a movement. I don't like it when people say that they don't call on people that because they have the open to work banner. And I'm like, well, it's a no-brainer. We make things harder than it has to be. They're looking for a job. You have a job to fill. It's a love match. There's a lot of phenomenal human beings that are unemployed in this country right now. You see what's happening. I mean, people, like I said, top producers are getting laid off with the same fervor that folks that have been dialing in for years have been doing. There's a lot of really amazing people who are available. Why not make it easier? We don't have to make things harder.
Before I ask you about your book, to kind of wrap this up, I do have a question around kind of age. Because I think some people, as they get into their late 50s, might start to feel like, I'm not sure if I'm as desirable anymore. How would you tailor a resume for a person at that age to overcome that concern that somebody has?
I'm a true believer that the age has nothing to do with it. It's the relevancy. people are not deemed too old for a job. They are deemed irrelevant to what's going on in that particular industry or that function. So it's not a popular opinion because, again, we sort of love the old times. We love how things were done back then. But you have to be changing with the times. If you are not someone who is able to keep up, you're not someone who has a passion for learning something new. If you want to continue doing things the way that you've always done them, then a hiring manager who won't hire you probably has a pretty good leg to stand on, right? You've got to show relevance because we all get older. And I hate the idea that all the advice that we give to people that are experiencing age discrimination is look younger. For the most part, you're not going to. I mean, you can, if you want to do such thing. But that's terrible advice. I think what we need to be saying is look relevant. Look like you know how the times are changing. Look that on your resume and how you speak that you're adaptive to new technologies, new philosophies, new way of doing business, new way. I always use the example. My daughter really runs sort of the day-to-day of Storyline, the operation. She's in her 30s. She's brilliant, educated in New York, yada, 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 yada. When she came on board like 6 or 7 years ago, she was like, Mom, we really need to invest in new technology. And I'm like, what kind of technology? We've been sending everything by emails. And she wouldn't take it. So we invested $500,000 in technology, right? And it's phenomenal. You have to be able to say, hey, let's make this investment in our business, but let's make this investment in ourselves to learn those new things. If somebody else would have said it to me, maybe I wouldn't have taken it so seriously. But she said, listen, we want to be competitive. If we want to manage all these I've got millions and millions of documents. We've got 300,000 former customers restore and ship, right? She said, we need to invest in this. And I said, okay, let's do it. And it's made our lives so much easier. It's the ability to continue to be relevant and to change. We don't write resumes like we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Sometimes we don't write resumes like we did 2 years ago. We're constantly adapting and changing and evolving. That's what you have to do as a business. It's what you need to do as a human.
I love it. The relevance thing is so key. One question I want to ask too, somewhat related, is when people are applying for multiple roles, is it good enough to have one resume, or do you think you need to cater each specific resume depending on if I say the roles, they may be somewhat similar, but they're different enough that maybe the KPIs are going to be measured for are different? Would you say 2 different resumes or try to shape one?
I'm not like a huge fan of the multiple resume approach, and I'm definitely not a fan for tailoring your resume for every job you apply for. That sounds really miserable, and you've got to apply for a lot of jobs. So I've been saying you've got to apply for double the jobs to get half the interviews with the market. There's a lot of fake jobs out there, stuff we don't have time to talk about today. So I say have one really good resume that's going to work for like a group of related positions. So you cannot be a ballerina and an astronaut in one resume. The skill set completely different, right? But if you're a business development executive or director of sales or an account manager, maybe you're interested in being an individual contributor and a sales manager, then you're going to maybe have a couple little zhuzh changes to, make that resume relevant. But right now, the jack of all trades or the Jane of all trades, the person that can kind of do everything, they're persona non grata right now in hiring because they don't have a definitive focus. And the more focused and the more decisive and the more specific you can be about what you bring to the party, the more likely you're to get an interview. So to answer your question, which I know is probably clear as mud, yes, you can have 1 or 2 different versions, but once you start getting into 6, 7, or 8 different versions, you don't need a different resume. You need a different philosophy about how you're going to conduct your job search, and you need some focus on what you want to be when you grow up.
Great way to put it.
And that's when we would suggest career coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
To kind of wrap up our amazing conversation, can you tell us a little about your book?
Sure. Career Confidence, I wrote last year, and it is a compilation of stories and tales about, my own life and how this business was born, but most importantly about the clients that we've met along the way, the things that I've learned in 24 years and talking to hundreds of thousands of people and hearing their stories. And it all comes down to advocacy, right? Being your own best advocate, being your own best cheerleader, not being afraid to go after what you want. A lot of us came from nothing. We've had, poor upbringings, or maybe you've had challenging situations, or maybe you've had the best situation. But ultimately, people are people, and really how you want to live your life and your success and failure really solely depends on, how hard you're willing to work at it. And there's a lot about work ethic. And there's great tips and tools for college graduates. I just got a really lovely note this morning from a young girl who said, I'm loud and I'm powerful and I am, who I am. And I'm tired of making excuses for that in the workplace. And I said, girl, don't you make any excuses for who you are. Be who you are. That will serve you the best your whole life. So, young and old folks are taking a lot of fun and good takeaways and good life lessons from this book. So, I'm glad people are enjoying it.
And where can people find the book, and where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it at Barnes and Noble. You can find it at any bookshop, retailers. It's at Walmart. It's a lot of different places. Easiest, I think, is for Amazon because, like you said, Michael, we all have our Amazon accounts connected to our phone. You can just search my name, Robynn Storey, Career Confidence. It'll pop up. And the audiobook is available now. And the Kindle will be, I think the Kindle will be either has dropped or will be dropping shortly. And, of course, you can get the hard copy, the hardcover as well.
That's great. And with 1 million followers on LinkedIn, there's a chance that you're already following Robynn. But if not, you should follow her because the stories she shares are absolutely amazing to read. So I highly encourage that. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think if you enjoyed this episode, you're going to enjoy another episode we did a while back about crushing your interview. So definitely check that out. We'll link it down there. And thanks again, and join us next time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Robynn.